The captain and the coach say the team needs a healthier attitude and more respect for the game, but I'm not convinced that's going to cut it for this version of the Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Friday, October 25th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And before we get started, looking at the storylines, stats, and signals from a 5-2 loss last night to the Dallas Stars. A quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. If you're new to the podcast, I am a lifelong Bruins fan. I've been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years now. I was a full-time hockey news editor at The Score, and I've been hosting this podcast since 2019. And we've seen very few stretches like this for the Boston Bruins, especially to begin a season, and especially under Jim Montgomery. The Bruins have had excellent starts over the past two seasons, partly because of fairly easy schedules, especially last year when they played some of the basement dwellers multiple times, like San Jose, Anaheim, Chicago. A much different story this year and much different results after the Bruins dropped to 3-4-1 following a 5-2 loss to the Dallas Stars last night, a team that is primed for a deep run in the playoffs this season. Incredibly deep team. The Bruins were able to hang with them for the first period, but fell apart in the second. And the coach, the captain, weren't really holding back afterwards. Jim Montgomery highlighting attitude after the game. He said it's quite significant, but our attitudes need to go in a better, healthier direction. You try to control what you can control, try and excel at your role. He said the Bruins' attitudes are not in the moment. They're on results. And what does that mean? Well, when your attitude is on results, Montgomery continued, you tend to take too many penalties that we're seeing. You get frustrated quickly. You turn the puck over a lot because you don't want to work for the offense. You want results right away. That attitude of not willing to work for what we want to get our team game is causing some struggles right now. And Montgomery specifically visibly lit into the team during a timeout in the second period at the beginning of another penalty kill attempt. He was trying to focus on simplifying things, and finding consistency in attitudes is a priority for this team. He said, when you don't work, what happens is your attitude starts to get more toward results. You forget how hard you need to work in this league. And if you're not focused on habits and details, you're going to get frustrated. The margins of error aren't very big in the NHL. The Bruins are on the wrong side of it right now, and he thinks their attitudes are driving it. Brad Marchand added he doesn't think the Bruins respect the game at the moment. You can see in terms of the effort, a lot of mistakes they're making, and the reasons they feel they're losing is because of their lack of respect for the game and consistency in details. But on the flip side, he said those are things you can fix. When you have a lack of effort and guys just not caring, that's a whole different issue, and that's not where we are, according to the captain. So it's not about indifference, not caring. It's more mistakes that they believe they can rectify. He said it's of our own doing, which is a good thing because we can rectify it, he said. This is the captain. We've got to get back to playing the right way for 60 minutes, doing the right things all the time, understanding that success is hard and we need to play a hard game to win. That's how we've always won. We just need to get back to that. Again, the question is, do they have the horses to get it done at the moment? Is this lineup set up to compete, to win each and every night? And you can make an argument that that is not the case. However, some core players like Marchand himself, Charlie Coyle, Trent Frederic, they have not performed up to speed. So whether you can question the roster composition, the fact is those core guys have not performed as of yet. And we saw last week that the coach was visibly upset at Marchand on the bench, screaming at him, making contact with him. They were both poo-pooing that, downplaying it prior to the game yesterday. Marchand said it's unfortunate how coaches are scrutinized over things like that. There's a lack of accountability nowadays because people can't handle the heat. You make a mistake like that, which was Marchand trying to do too much in the offensive zone, losing the puck. It led to a goal the other way that was called back. He said, you make a mistake like that and you deserve to hear about it. He said, if Montgomery didn't react like that, we would have much bigger issues. The fact that it's something that we're talking about is disappointing, but that's the way things are. And he kind of lamented things that are, people being too sensitive these days, lack of accountability, etc. But it shows that the captain and the coach are on the same page. After the loss, Charlie McAvoy also picked up on the attitude bit, mentioning that it's kind of new territory for the team, especially because of their starts over the first 10 games or so over the past couple of seasons. McAvoy said, we don't like these results. We're acknowledging that. It's new territory for the team, having this happen early in the year after the last couple of years when they were gangbusters. He said, it is a bit of our attitude. It hasn't won us anything being the best team in October. He did mention, though, they're fine. They're not going to panic. It's game 8. Hopefully, they've got a lot of games left and they'll keep getting better. Well, they certainly do have a lot of games left. And hopefully, yes, they will continue to get better. Now, speaking of the coach, the team, roster composition, changes, Jimmy Murphy had mentioned that Darren Dreger was on TSN 690 this morning and said he believes Bruins ownership and management will speak to each other ahead of tomorrow's game against the Maple Leafs. There's speculation about Jim Montgomery being on thin ice. We talked about it yesterday. Dreger said, quote, I can tell you there's going to be tough conversations between management and ownership today leading up to that Leafs game tomorrow. Among the teams at the top of the list to be watching are the Bruins because change is coming if they don't turn this around immediately. Now we'll discuss the Leafs later on and how there's pressure on them as well, coming off a couple of bad games. But, you look back to early in the 2000s, Pat Burns was fired after a 3-4-1 start. Ownership has not been shy about pulling the trigger on that. But again, the question is it a coaching problem? Is it a core player problem? Is it a new faces problem? A lack of talent problem? It's all part of the soup right now that is hindering the Bruins from succeeding, not to mention a tough schedule, not having your number one goalie in training camp. It all contributes into this, and there's lots up in the air right now. The Bruins are a fascinating team to watch. After the game, they were sticking to changing their attitudes, having more respect for the game, playing the right way, but the core players have to step up here. I've been focusing a lot on signing Tyler Johnson, recalling Fabian Lysell, mixing up the middle six, but the core guys, as we'll see here as we look at the stats and signals, they need to step up, and we'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. Prize Picks is the best place to get the best return on your picks for sports. Now, all you have to do is visit Prize Picks, and you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. They have over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, making Prize Picks the best daily fantasy sports site, which is accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long with Prize Picks. They put their members first. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as fast as 15 minutes. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app, use code LOCKEDONNHL, and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And Prize Picks, run your game. Get in on the action today over at Prize Picks. Okay, the Bruins actually hung pretty well with the Stars last night. If you look at the first period and all situations there in the first period, shot attempts were even at 21 apiece. The Stars had a 13-11 shot advantage, a 13-10 scoring chance advantage. The high danger chances were 4-4, and the score was 1-1 after the first period. David Pastrnak opened the scoring on a nifty steal and assist from Matt Poitras. They did allow Matt Duchene to score later in the period, and then the Bruins allowed 3 straight power play goals in the first 10 minutes of the second period as things just unraveled. David Pastrnak took a hooking penalty. Parker Wotherspoon, who was in the lineup for Mason Lohrei, who I had mentioned on yesterday's show, led the team in scoring over the past 5 games. He was out. David Pastrnak took another penalty, tripping against Matt Dumba. So that's 2 penalties from your best player who was in the box for 2 goals against. Later on in the third period, Brad Marchand cross-checked Ilya Lyubushkin. He also was called for a penalty against Tyler Seguin in the first period. So that's your 2 arguably best forwards taking 2 minor penalties. Now, on the other side of things, at least Nikita Zadorov didn't take a penalty. But when you talk about attitude and respect in the game, you can't be taking those 2 penalties if you're the captain either, setting the example. And the core guys quite simply aren't stepping up. Brad Marchand, 0 goals so far this season. He's got 4 assists through 8 games. It's on pace for only 41 points. Obviously, he's going to score sooner than later, but that simply can't happen. Now, when it comes to the Bruins, they were led in shots on goal by Pastrnak, who had 7, including Bruins goal. The other goal was scored by Justin Brazeau, which was nice to see him contribute as kind of a fringe guy, but it was the undisciplined play and allowing those power play goals in the second period that really hurt the Bruins. They had, again, 5 minor penalties in this one, and the Stars went 3 for 5 on the power play. You cannot give a team as talented as the Dallas Stars that many power play opportunities. You cannot tax your penalty killing unit like that game in and game out. It's going to wear them down. It's going to throw off people's ice time. David Pastrnak doesn't kill penalties, but you don't want him to be taking penalties either. So that's a real area of frustration for Bruins fans at the moment. This parade to the penalty box. The Bruins lead the NHL in terms of minor penalties this season. They're averaging 5-6 per game, which is egregious to say the least. Now, overall in this one, the Stars had the advantage in terms of, actually, the Bruins had the advantage in terms of shot attempts in this one, 57-55. 32-27 were the shots in favor of the Stars. The Bruins had a 10-9 high danger chance advantage. But again, those power play opportunities really sunk the Bruins. If it wasn't for those 3 penalties in which the Stars were able to successfully score on those opportunities, it could have been a different game. And that continuous parade to the penalty box is certainly hurting the Boston Bruins right now. And one of the most important stats we look at is point percentage. And right now in the Atlantic, the Bruins have a point percentage of .438, which is tied for 6th with the Buffalo Sabres. 3-4-1, 7 points through 8 games. They're 2 points up on the Montreal Canadiens, who have a game in hand. The Bruins have a -6 goal differential, which is 2nd worst in the Atlantic Division and 4th worst in the Eastern Conference as a whole. At the moment, this team does not look like a playoff team. Yes, it's only 8 games. And yes, there are new faces that need to be incorporated in the team. I was thinking about this watching last night. Like Zadorov, Brandon Carlo were paired together. You have Carlo coming back to take the puck. It takes time for a guy like Zadorov to know what his defensive partner's tendencies are, whether he's going to take the puck and skate it out, pass it over to him. It's the same thing with Lindholm playing with his forwards. And when you're constantly mixing up the lines as well, that doesn't help. So they need consistency in the lines. They need to stay out of the penalty box. They need to get the puck on net more often than the opposition. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. It's not just as simple as saying Jim Montgomery needs to be fired, because if you bring a new coach in, what does he have to work with? You can't just say, well, it's the personnel, because they come in and perhaps the system isn't what it's supposed to be. So whoever comes in, maybe it'll be the same with Tyler Johnson if he comes in. There's all kinds of things in the soup right now. It's management, it's coaching, it's roster composition, and we're just not used to this kind of a bad start for the Boston Bruins. And yes, they have stretches like this for times during the season. It's not uncommon to go 3-4-1 over an 8-game stretch. The fact that it's at the beginning of the season magnifies things. And even as I record this podcast, the Bruins were supposed to practice this morning and have still yet to take to the ice. So make of that what you will. They were supposed to practice at 11:30. It's now almost 11:40, and they have yet to take to the ice. So perhaps they're getting a bit of a reaming in the locker room. Perhaps they're having a players' conversation. Who knows what's going on? But the Bruins are really under the microscope at the moment. Jim Montgomery just stepping on to the ice per Steve Conroy, Scott McLaughlin. No players yet, so maybe they're having a bit of a discussion on their own. But there's real focus on this game tomorrow night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs have been struggling this week. Both teams are under the microscope, so there's really a lot on the line here. As we look at the signals to take from this game, again, they need to cut down on the penalties. Perhaps I saw Mark Diver in the AHL covering the Providence Bruins saying there's nobody absent from Providence practice this morning. Perhaps they waive someone this afternoon and sign Tyler Johnson in advance of tomorrow's game, but something needs to change here. You can say it's only 8 games, but we have enough of a sample size here to know that this lineup needs a bit of a shakeup. Not just line jumbling, but personnel-wise. So we'll see what happens here in advance of tomorrow's game, which we'll preview here as the podcast continues. It's Friday, a weekend chock full of football coming up. The NBA's back. Hockey's in full swing, of course, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, when you place your first $5 bet, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So that means when you're watching the games, you get a hunch in the middle of play, you can check the latest stats, view live play-by-play right in the app on the exact same page where you place your bets. So put $5 down on David Pastrnak scoring tomorrow night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. You can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, whether or not Pasta ends up scoring. It's all available at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. The stage is set for a fascinating battle tomorrow night between the Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that has lost 2 games in a row in pretty spectacular fashion, losing big time to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and then Craig Berube guiding the Leafs to a big loss last night against his former team, the St. Louis Blues. The Leafs have only 8 points this season through 4 games. They're 4-4. They have a negative goal differential. And they're facing a lot of scrutiny of their own heading into this game. And I already mentioned earlier, Darren Dreger reporting that management ownership for the Bruins discussing something today, and we'll be keeping a very close eye on whatever happens tomorrow. And should it be the Leafs who come out on top and kind of change things around, then there could be something that goes on following this game. Now, the Bruins heading onto the ice here, practice 12 minutes after it was meant to begin. So obviously they were having a players meeting as the coaches took to the ice first. Everybody knows what's at stake here, even this early on in the season. It's a big, big game for the Bruins and for the Leafs. Now the Leafs, as I mentioned, coming in on a 2-game losing streak. They've lost 3 of their past 4, dating back to last Saturday against the New York Rangers. They did beat Tampa, but then lost to Columbus and St. Louis. The Bruins, 3-4-1, 2-game losing streak in regulation, 3-game losing streak overall, 1 point over their past 3 games. Now the Leafs and Bruins offensively struggling, both of them. They are tied with 2.88 points per game, or goals per game, which is tied for 21st overall in the NHL. The Bruins, we can see why they're struggling. The Leafs, they have so much talent up front, so it's kind of a surprise that they are not one of the top offensive teams. They've got, Mitch Marner's got 7 points, but only 1 goal so far. William Nylander leads the way with 5 goals, 7 points. Max Domi, 6 points. Austin Matthews off to a bit of a slow start. Only 3 goals in 8 games, 5 points total. John Tavares, 5 points in 7 games. And not really much generator from the blue line as well. Oliver Ekman-Larsson leading the way with 5 points in 8 games. Morgan Riley, 3 points through 8 games. So this is the team that is looking to bust out, as are the Boston Bruins, who are continued to be led in scoring by Cole Koepke, who's got 6 points, tied with David Pastrnak at 6 points. He's got 5 goals, 1 assist. His playmaking has really diminished so far this season. Defensively, Toronto's a bit better. They're allowing 3 goals per game, ranking 12th. The Bruins are at 24th, allowing 3.63 goals per game. Both teams' power plays are pretty bad. Toronto's 27th ranked. The Bruins are 25th ranked. Penalty kill, Toronto's much better. They're 7th. The Bruins down to 19th after going only 2 for 5 last night on the penalty kill. Again, this will be a game that will be very closely watched, and both teams struggling here to begin the season. You have teams that have been in the top 3 in the Atlantic Division for quite some time, and right now both are outside the top 4 in terms of point percentage. You have the Ottawa Senators in first right now in terms of point percentage. They're 4-2, 667 point percentage, and they've been missing Linus Ullmark for a little bit here. The Panthers at 611, Lightning, Red Wings tied at 571, and then you have the Leafs, Sabres, Bruins, Canadiens. If the Bruins do not come out with a huge effort tomorrow night against the Maple Leafs, if their struggles continue, if they keep taking penalties, if they give Toronto's offense an opportunity to break out with all these power play opportunities, you're not going to keep these guys quiet for too long, then this could get very interesting by Sunday or Monday here in Bruins land. Following this game against the Maple Leafs, things don't really get much easier. Again, they host Toronto tomorrow night, and then they will host the Philadelphia Flyers on Tuesday. That's a beatable team. They're not off to a great start, but then they will face the Hurricanes, another game against the Flyers, Seattle, Toronto, Calgary, and Ottawa to begin November. So apart from those games against the Flyers, it's still a bit of a tough stretch here, and the Flyers are still loaded offensively. They've just been really struggling as well to begin the season. Very, very interesting times here in Bruins land. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me here today. Thank you so much for subscribing, listening, downloading, and please do check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey next if you have not already. All the latest from steal and flip to give you an edge over the opposition. We'll be back on Monday to recap the Leafs game. If there's anything big that happens over the weekend, I'll be sure to pop up immediate reaction on the YouTube channel. So please do follow along there for all the very, very latest on the Boston Bruins. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. I'm off to a Guelph Storm game tonight, which should be fun. Bunch of stuff happening over the weekend. So please do follow on X to keep up with all things Locked On Boston Bruins as well. Have a great weekend, friends. We'll talk to you here again on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.